Hello and welcome to the Where Does It Come From podcast. Here I am today talking with the wonderful Sarah Jordan from Y.O.U Underwear, who has recently had a very exciting announcement to make, which she's going to tell us all about, to do with B Corps, hence the title of this piece. So first of all, I want to say welcome, Sarah, to the Where Does It Come From podcast.
Thank you very much, Jo. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Tell us a bit about yourself, Sarah, and what on earth compelled you to get involved with underwear?
That is a question I ask myself on a daily basis. So yes, my name is Sarah. I am founder, CEO of Y.O.U Underwear. We are what I say, or how I describe us, as a sustainable underwear business. Obviously, that kind of means something and nothing, sustainability. But basically, we're trying to change the world by encouraging people to change their underwear, change the world one pair of pants at a time. And essentially, the idea came from me discovering the challenges faced by mostly women and girls who don't have access to underwear and the impact that that has, because you can imagine some of the health and hygiene issues, but actually it was the inability to go to school. So the kind of access to education that really got me. Because when you've got your period, if you don't have any underwear as well as the protection to put in it, then you can miss a week of your schooling every month, which is 25%. So from an early age, girls are missing out, basically. And it obviously carries on and has a massive impact through their lives just because they don't have a pair of underwear. So it was something that I discovered when I was in Uganda in 2016 and really just stuck with me and piss me off if I want. I can't think of a better way of putting it, because it's such a simple thing in theory. So it's literally the first thing you put on in the morning, but has such a big impact if you don't have it. So that was kind of the initial motivating factor, was that trying to change something basically. And then not knowing anything about underwear or manufacturing or fashion or anything else, I started to look into those to kind of say, if we're going to do something about it and provide underwear, how do we do that? And then discovered two other huge problems, which is conventional cotton, as you know, is very polluting. Huge amount of insecticide, pesticide, water, all sorts of problems caused to the farmers, the communities, to people that work with the cotton all the way through its journey effectively. And also the fashion industry more broadly is really not very nice. And I basically kind of put those three together, joined the dots, which makes it sound very simple, but it was a couple of years in the process, and set up a business that was kind of trying to address all three of those challenges. So we now only use organic cotton, fully certified, fair trade and GOTS organic cotton. We manufacture sustainably, which is basically making sure that people are paid and treated fairly, right the way through our supply chain. And then we donate pairs of underwear for every pair that we sell. So primarily supporting a charity called Smalls for All. And we've just donated, I think, our 21,000th pair to them.
Wonderful. So wonderful.
Yeah,
I always, you and I have been on panels together lots of times, and we've obviously known each other through the years. And I always see huge parallels between Y.O.U Underwear and Where Does It Come From, as well as just being at the end of the alphabet, which we both seem to always end up at. But it's just so interesting that we've both tried to take it all on, and you've tried to take it all on. So it's not just about producing a great sustainable product. It's about creating good working conditions, about the people, and then the donating the underwear as well to solve the problem. So it's absolutely fantastic. And I love the focus on women and girls, and again we've got that in parallel, and we're women, which helps. And I agree with what you say about the pissing off thing as well, because you know as a woman how many barriers there are for us generally, and I don't want to sound like a sob story, but when you think about women in the global south, say, or with other things to worry about, just day-to-day life, with the fact they can't go to school for a quarter of the time, that's just mind-boggling size barrier, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like we've got enough to deal with. Everybody's got enough to deal with. Why does a pair of pants have to be one more thing, the kind of straw that breaks camel's back? So yeah, we've both taken it all on, which
without a background, without any kind of background.
Yeah, exactly. Without knowing what we're doing, for better.
Maybe that's better. Maybe we wouldn't have done it otherwise. I don't know.
But I think so. I mean, I genuinely think I probably wouldn't have done it if I had known. But I think it also gives you can ask the stupid questions because you just genuinely don't know, and you tackle it in a different way because it's like, well, why can't we do this? Because nobody's told me otherwise, and I might learn that that's why it's not done like that. But I can kind of learn that for myself and work things out differently. And I think because of all the problems with fashion and cotton, et cetera, we have to do something differently.
Yeah.
And that's probably true with sustainable businesses and however you define those more broadly, because what we're doing at the moment clearly isn't working.
No,
so we need to think differently. So yeah, having no knowledge is
it helps. But 21,000 pairs, or 21,000 girls or women who now have a pair of pants thanks to Y.O.U Underwear. And again, if you're looking at the sustainable development goals around, equality, I mean, it's a fantastic achievement. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to our customers basically for doing
that.
Well,
I'm wearing them. I'm wearing both my bra and I have many pairs of pants and several bras. And I actually, I think I was involved in the first crowdfund that you did. But since then, I love the African print ones that you have. I love those. They're great. And I can see we were just talking before we went live, and behind you, anyone watching this will see that you've got the prints there looking at potentially pajamas coming soon.
Yeah, looking at new products. How can we use the same fabric, essentially the same patterns, the same organic cotton, to widen our range and kind of increase that, just so we can have more impact and sort of grow as a business as well. So work in progress, slow progress.
And you have a shop now too, don't you?
We do. That is also keeping me out of trouble. We were part of a program in Oxford called Meanwhile in Oxford, partnership between Makespace, an organisation, and Oxford City Council, basically to fill some of the empty shops and units. So we are specifically in the Covered Market, which is a kind of historic indoor market in the centre of Oxford. And they got several small businesses in just to fill some of the gaps, because obviously retail has really struggled. It's not hugely accessible. Oxford is very expensive. And it just gave us the opportunity to kind of test it basically and see if we can do this in the real world, because we've been online for the last 3 or 4 years. So we've survived for 4 or 5 months, and we're trying to negotiate for a year to see if we can stay for a little bit longer. So great. But it's busy, it's hard work doing both.
Yeah, but that's good that it's busy. If you were just sitting there and not selling anything, you'd think about it a different way, wouldn't you?
Yes. No, it goes up and down, but it's just amazing to kind of meet customers and tell them our story and explain what we're trying to do and have all these conversations basically.
Yeah, and I think that there's also another benefit, that even if they don't buy anything, if you're getting people thinking about it, the next time they go to buy a pair of pants, they might think a little bit about why it's important, what it's being made of, who's making it. So if we can spread the message, trying to get people to ask the questions, then you're going to have a longer term impact than just them buying some pants.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually probably the bigger value of it, really, is just starting those conversations, because we've got our B Corp signs up, we've got, our thing saying change the world by changing your underwear, and people go, oh, how are my pants changing the world? And it just starts that conversation, as you say. So even if they don't buy anything from us, they kind of have that awareness that something else is going on. They need to think about their purchases and their consumption, etc., etc.
Exactly. No, it's only good. You've thrown in the B word there, which is my next question, which is great. No, that's great. So very, very exciting news that you became a B Corp, but not just any old B Corp. Is it the highest scoring B Corp in the UK and the top fashion brand in the world? That's pretty impressive. Yes. So what made you decide to go for B Corp, and was it a surprise to get such a high score?
It was definitely a very pleasant surprise. For anybody that's done it, is thinking about it, it's a hell of a process. Definitely one I would recommend, but not a quick win. Really very rigorous process. So going through that was amazing, actually, as kind of part of our business journey. It's always been something I wanted to do. I think from the moment I kind of discovered what B Corps were, kind of what the organization and movement is, and read all the Let My People Go Surfing, etc. books about it, it was like, that's what we want to do, because we're a sustainable business, and that's kind of the pinnacle of, we want to go there. Originally, I didn't think we were big enough, actually, because we were only 2 people when we went through the certification process, and I was just like, we're just not there yet. Basically, this is big companies, Patagonia, etc. And we just need to kind of get a bit bigger. And it was one of the local, there's a B Corp group in and around Oxford, Be Local, who encouraged me, and he was like, well, just do it, because if nothing else, it really helps you grow in terms of your sustainability journey, and kind of giving you that framework to build within, and it will help define some of the decisions that you make, and it will just be useful and interesting. So it was actually the first lockdown that kind of provided the opportunity, because we couldn't do as much of everything else. We weren't traveling. It gave us the chance to kind of step back, look at the business, and do all the stuff behind the scenes that you never get time to do. And B Corp was one of those. So we kind of started thinking about it in sort of May, I suppose, 2020-ish. Did a bit of research, had a look at the B impact assessment, but didn't really do a huge amount until the September that year, when I was like, well, we've set ourselves a goal of completing it by the end of the year. We better get on with it. And then kind of kept going through the assessment. So it's an online tool that you can access for free. It's available to anybody, and it is a brilliant way of just tracking your impact. And it asks you various questions. Some of those are kind of gateway things that then open up other areas. And you need to get, I think it's 200 out of 200 points, you need to get above 80 to certify.
All right.
And they always say, get higher than that before you submit, because they will knock you back through the certification process, because the next step is basically to kind of prove it almost. You answer all the questions about what you're doing, and then they sort of say, well, okay, where's all the evidence? And you have to kind of document everything. So we got to, I think, 127, just over 127 before we completed, and then finally hit submit literally the 23rd of December, I think it was that year. So I was desperate to get it in before the end of the year, and then didn't hear anything. So it's a hugely popular, growing accreditation, basically, and they are really oversubscribed. So it took about 9 or 10 months before B Lab got back in touch with us to start that certification process, and then it was pretty quick. You have fortnightly calls, and as I said, they go through and kind of get you to upload documentation and proof of everything that you're doing across the 5 business areas. So it is the most holistic view of your business. It looks at things like your governance. So are you legally set up to kind of do the things that you say you will do? Your reporting, etc. It looks at workers, it looks at community, it looks at environment, and it looks at your customers, and kind of deep dives basically into each of those to say exactly what you're doing around sustainability. And then you get points and fractions of points, and all the little half points and everything count. And yeah, we amazingly ended up with 160.5, which is the highest in the UK. And I just kept refreshing, because I was like, I'm just waiting for this to go down. Is this actually true? Which is amazing. And I think, yeah, I was incredibly thrilled, because it was, as I said, it's a really hard, tough process. And as a small business, it took us months and months to kind of do that. And a year, 18 months in total, and to kind of end up like that, particularly, I think, as well, as a fashion brand, there's so much greenwashing that I actually have a fashion brand up at that level, I think is great. So not just from our perspective, but to kind of say, you can do this. You don't have to do all the things that necessarily the high street fast fashion brands do. You can do something different and do it well. So I'm hoping that it kind of adds a bit of credibility to us as a sector, I suppose, more broadly, that you know, as with you and where does you come from? Yeah, you can do something different.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it's obviously something I've looked into, and I'm probably a bit like you before you did it. I keep thinking, oh, we're not big enough, or I've got so many other things that seem more important first. And I've had one of my team look into it, and yet we still haven't filled in that initial thing. Yeah, I mean, I know we're doing all the right things. I don't know what's holding me back, but maybe you getting it will spur me on to have the confidence to do it. But
I would say just start, even if you don't. And I think for anyone, even if you're not going to submit, it's a really valuable, if you are a sustainable business in the kind of broadest, whatever that means, it will just help. Or even if you're not, it will really help you identify things that you're doing well, areas to improve. The whole process itself is about continually improving and learning and doing better. So you have to recertify after 3 years. All the way through, you have to set goals to kind of say, and these are the areas that we're working to improve. So it's not a kind of end point in its own right. And the assessment itself is brilliant at helping you to go through and say, and you'll find that you're doing a lot more of it than you think you are.
No, I think we are. I think, yeah, I think that's what it is. I think we're doing, you know, right from the beginning, we've been conscious of impact and all of those kind of things. It's just, I mean, my next question was very much, I think you've covered some of it, but what are the key areas you need to report on when you're putting in for it, and what kind of level of detail do you have to put in?
So it kind of depends on what you do. One of the benefits of it as a tool is that it's kind of sector agnostic. It's for everybody. It's across every industry, every sector, and every size of business. And they sort of scale the process to reflect that. So there's a lot of questions that aren't necessarily relevant. There's a lot that are, and then you go into a lot more depth, particularly as a manufacturing business, which is effectively what we are. We're not doing the making ourselves, but we are sourcing that. So there's a huge amount going through your supply chain, basically, and how much visibility do you have, and what do you track and monitor, and the impact of that. For us, obviously, we scored quite highly on the community. We got about 70 something points in community, which is all about the donations for us, really. We're doing a lot to provide underwear to other people. And then it's kind of, what are you doing? Who do you give them to? How many are you donating? What's the impact? What proportion is it of your business? Because obviously you can do things as a percentage, you can do straight up values, but actually it's showing that this is core to your business as much as anything, rather than token numbers. I think they really want to see. So it does get very granular around some of your financial numbers, which are there just to give an idea of scale rather than any sort of value to it. And then the impact and the donations and kind of how much percentage you're doing of all of these things to sort of give them an idea of what category you're in effectively, and environmentally as well. So how do you track what you're doing? So your footprint more broadly, whether that's your carbon footprint, your sort of net zero work, your digital footprint as well. It's kind of gives you the opportunity to get credit for everything that you're doing. And I know the amazing work that you do as well. You will be doing a lot of these things. And it's just, for us, it was kind of formalizing it, particularly as a small business. We don't have a policy around pensions because we don't have any.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of don't have that. But actually, we do treat staff very well. We try and support them in their learning, in their development, in their pay, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as you can kind of prove that and formalize it, you get the credit for. And actually not having big teams in some way makes it easier, because we can make the changes to some of our holiday policies, for example, that you just would be very difficult to do as a big international business. Whereas we can just say, okay, we'll give people whatever time off it is, and we can just implement that. So there is an advantage in size from an agility perspective as well.
I think in general, a smaller ethical business that is the case, isn't it? You learn and implement that learning pretty quickly. Yeah. And
generally. I think supporting, the whole bit, kind of supporting your supply chain and manufacturers to kind of improve what they're doing as well. You do get a lot of credit for all the different small things that you're doing. So I think for us, we have a mix of social and environmental impact that we track. Some of that is the donations, some of that's how we treat staff, people through the supply chain. And then the environmental stuff is kind of, how does using organic cotton benefit people and the planet over conventional cotton? What else do we do around our packaging, around our transport, around recycling, around end of life? It's kind of, it really is a very holistic view of it. But I think if you are a business that kind of cares about this sort of stuff, it's not easy because it's a lot of work, but it's relatively, you're doing a lot of it. So I think
it's transparency, isn't it? I mean, we're both very much into transparency, as are most of the other ethical businesses. When people are doing it well, you know, they're being transparent because they know their supply chain, they know their impacts, that kind of thing. So being transparent, I guess, is a key part of B Corp.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's one of the it's one of the advantages if you're trying to do it, because you can see what other businesses are doing. So everybody has to share their impact reports, so you can kind of see that stuff. And it means that there's a lot more sharing and collaboration between B Corps, which I think is one of the advantages as well. And it's also I think on the flip side, it's one of the challenges, and I've certainly had conversations with people saying, but I don't want to share this information. And it's like, well, you have to. And if you really are doing all of this stuff, then why not? Because it's not a challenge. It's not designed to catch you out, but it's very much designed to kind of be open and share all of that stuff. So I think kind of understanding why you want to become a B Corp and how your business fits in with that vision. And if you really believe it, then you can definitely do it. But there is a lot of time, effort, and information, I suppose, that goes into it.
I think it's culture as well, isn't there? I mean, certainly, I even find this with some of our suppliers, that culturally, we don't like to share a lot of the detail of things we do. I suppose there's a defensive side of it, culturally, and there's also what if someone tries to copy what I'm doing? You know, and I hear that from suppliers quite often, is if I tell you who I'm working with, and you know, then why, how come you won't go around the back of me and go direct to them?
Yeah.
So there's an element of having to change the culture, so that if you're doing something openly and honestly, then you know that's the way it should be, rather than being defensive and worrying about it. And I think in business we have, not we, you and I, but in business itself has had this secrecy attached to it as to how you do business, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the culture is a really good way of sort of summarizing it, because I think you have to be kind of bought into that and the principles of transparency, etc. We don't like to share how much money we're making as individually or as a business or anything else, and whether if it's too low you feel bad, and if it's too high you feel bad. You know, there's it is a tough one. I think the thing about, I mean, we're very open about who our manufacturers are, and I'm sure at some level that causes challenges, but it is about saying, well, this, you know, it's kind of just opening it up, really. I think if people are going to go to them directly, kind of fine, we're trying to do something different. And I think it is more about collaboration and working together than,
I think so,
competition. And certainly when it gets to kind of the environmental climate challenges, we have to do this together. There is no other option. So we kind of have to open all of this stuff up and work out how we can solve things together and collectively. So
yeah, it's bigger picture, isn't it? It's bigger. When if you're running an ethical business, I'm sure you'd agree, we're not in it to be millionaires, are we? We would not do this.
No.
To be millionaires. We have different reasons for doing it. I'm reminded when you're speaking, I was talking at an event a couple of years ago with Cressy from Elvis and Cress, and she was also on speaking at the same day, so I listened to her presentation before mine, and somebody asked her, how do you stop people stealing your idea and going off and doing exactly the same thing behind your back? And she sort of shrugged her shoulders and said, well, why would I stop them? You know, if people are going to copy you, that's great. You should have moved on to the next thing by the time they're doing the previous thing. You know, you've got, as a business, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly evolving what you're doing and changing it. You know, if somebody's copying what you're doing and trying to steal your supplies, you just move on from it. And I really like that attitude, actually.
Yeah, I think it's true, because you kind of, there's something about copying is the highest form of flattery. It's like if they think that we're doing a good job and they want to do the same thing, and if it's about having an impact, brilliant, because we can't do this on our own.
Exactly.
I'm doing a business thing with Enterprise Nation on Thursday, and getting people to share their business ideas, and it's like everybody is worried about it, and it's like anybody that's good enough to do it is busy and doing their own thing, and anybody that isn't is lazy and isn't going to take it forward.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah. I think you just have to be philosophical about it and kind of go, yeah, somebody somewhere. And there are awful examples of some fast fashion brands who are stealing stuff from small creative makers, etc. But on the flip side, I think generally you've just got to kind of say, you know what, if people are going down this route, then great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I felt the same, because I mean, as you know, but when we started up, we had the code on the label and everything, and nobody else was really doing that. And now they're everywhere. And I'm not saying for one second that people are stealing the idea from us. I think it's all evolved in different places, and you know, we've all headed in the right direction in terms of transparency. But I think, oh, that's really great. That's really great that people are sharing the stories behind things. You know, it's a really positive thing. You can't sort of say, oh, we were doing that first. There's no point in that, is there?
No, I mean, the more transparency in the sector, the better, basically. So if everybody, and if it kind of forces those conversations as well, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Kind of
I agree with you.
Questions. It's like, well, if we're all transparent, gradually people will kind of go, well, okay, these guys are, these aren't. What's going on there? What are they hiding? And start to ask the questions. And ultimately, it's kind of customer pester power that's going to get us.
Yeah. And it's going back, you were saying as well, at the lean flexibility. When you're a small brand, we can implement these things, and then people will go to a bigger brand and say, well, if you shop with Y.O.U Underwear, they're doing this. If you shop with Where Does It Come From, they're telling the story behind what they're doing. How come you're not? You know, how come you can't do those kind of things if they can? And we can, they'll hopefully. Someone gave me a big piece of advice once, or a big story which impacted me, which was even if we go under, obviously we don't want to go under, but if it has made customers push other brands and bigger brands to do things better, then even if we go under, you've had a positive impact, you've caused change, you know, you've been disruptive. So it's always a positive thing to influence customer behavior, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I used to work many years ago at Oxfam, and one of their ultimate mission was to do themselves out of a job. Because if they've ended poverty, you know, it's kind of, if you've done this and you don't exist for good or bad reason, then you've done something. And I guess it's the same. It's like, well, if we've had that impact and are having making small changes and little ripples and stuff and getting people to talk about it, then it can only be a good thing. So so by surviving. But
so if fast fashion brands have they create all of their underwear using organic cotton, and they give a pair of pants every time someone buys one to a charity, and then they share the story of everything that they create and have positive impacts on people and planet, then you and I don't need to be running our brands anymore because they're all doing it. So that's a great thing. But we'll hope that happens. That would be great. Anyway, back to the questions. Obviously, proving your impacts, as we've discussed, is really, really key when you're running an ethical brand. But obviously that's got a huge time overhead, which you've mentioned. So how do you make this manageable when you're focusing on growing your business in sort of day-to-day business?
That is a very good question, and I'm not sure we have made it manageable. I think the big thing is to kind of go for at the start in terms of what's your motivation. You know, what's the problem you're trying to solve, or what's that thing that pisses you off or thing that motivates you, and why are you doing this? What are your values? And then again, how are you sort of working that goes towards that? And then your impact follows from it. I think so. It's kind of identifying the priority areas that you're focusing on. So those things are all big, but actually narrowing it down to what's the number one thing I want to do? Because in the sustainability space, you can kind of tackle anything and everything, and it's all huge. And the more you unpick, the more there is to do, and the more overwhelming, inspiring, daunting kind of everything it is. So I think it's kind of starting small and making small steps that are going to make some changes. So really thinking about, what does this mean for you as a business, and what are you going to sort of tackle first, and picking that one small thing, because every little does help. I think also it's a journey, which sounds cheesy, but the cliche, but it really is. And for us, we've always been very much, we're here, this is where we want to go, and kind of B Corp was one of those things. It's going to take us a while, and we're going to make some steps, and we're going to go backwards at points, but being very transparent with customers about what we want to do, where we are succeeding, where we are failing, where we're going quicker or more slowly, and just doing it gradually and not trying to kind of tackle everything. I find that really hard. So when I say how you make it manageable, I don't think we are necessarily making it manageable, because I think we're probably at times biting off more than we can chew. But I think if we don't aim big, you kind of almost don't get anywhere. So I struggle with that dynamic on a fairly regular basis. But for me, it's kind of having those big goals and then working backwards. So when I started, I set the intention of 23,000 pairs of underwear donated by 2023, which was partly completely made up number and partly was kind of based on, okay, if we grow like this, then we might get there, we might get there, we might get there. And we will end up being there, which is amazing. But we had to have some sort of target. And then I think it's doing the same thing and having a big goal, but individually on a day-to-day basis, having small things that kind of take you there. So, and it means our values mean that we will grow more slowly. We will have less profit, less margins, less kind of growth in that traditional sense than other businesses. I could do this much more quickly and much more cheaply, but that's not the motivation behind it. As you said, we're not doing this to kind of make money, we're doing it to have an impact.
Yeah.
And therefore that informs all of your decisions. There's always going to be compromises, and there's always going to be a lot of stuff that you want to do better and you want to do that you can't do now. But I think if you go back to kind of what you're trying to achieve, then you do try and make those steps, and it is very much about just continually learning, improving, and recognizing that some of that's going to come at a cost, not just financially, to get you there, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a benefit to having big goals, so long as if you don't quite meet the big goal you set yourself, feeling like you failed. It's actually that regularly looking back and saying, what have we actually achieved?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also when you say that, it's kind of the big goals, but also celebrating the small wins, because this is hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see what you do. I see, obviously the B Corp one is, I'm whooping around the place when I see that one. But even things like setting up your shop, I mean, getting a new member on the team, things like that. We know as a small business that those kind of things are massive, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And I think you do need to give yourself credit for those and take the time to kind of recognize them. So the big goals are there and brilliant, and whether you hit them or not, recognizing how far you've come. So even, I mean, with our shop, it's really hard, but every now and again it's kind of just stand there and go, we've got a shop, we've got a proper
well, I'm well impressed, I'll tell you.
And it's amazing, and we have customers and they are giving us amazing feedback and that sort of stuff, and just recognizing what you are doing, even if you're constantly pushing yourself. And I think that's partly my personality, is I'm always like, yeah, but I want to do this, I want to do more.
Oh, I'm the same.
But recognizing, taking the time to step back and go, actually, we are doing quite well. And I think because it's been sort of 3 or 4 years, I feel like we should be bigger and financially more viable.
Yeah, but
also we've only been going for 3 or 4 years, so it's kind of, you need to recognize your own sort of challenges, I suppose.
Yeah, but there's one thing that I was told off for, and I am severely often told off for, using the word should. We should be here, we should be there, we should be doing this. The word should doesn't mean anything at all. We are here, we are doing this. It's that sense of should immediately makes you feel negative, because you think that you're not achieving, whereas in fact you are achieving. And when something gets me down, so for example, we had something earlier this year with a customer, the product that they ordered, which was quite a lot of that particular product, it was a tote bag. When it arrived, it wasn't what they wanted, and there was issues that we all had to learn from, but I was completely beating myself up about it and getting really upset about it. And I think it was my husband said to me, but yes, even though it's even though something was wrong and we ended up giving back a fair proportion of what they paid, although financially we made a loss on that particular production, which has never happened before, and it was very upsetting, we had still paid the cooperatives and the social enterprise to make the product. So actually we still had the positive impact further down the supply chain. So it's because it's different the way we do things. The things that you and I are trying to do is not around the money. I'm not saying I want to lose money. What I'm saying is you're still having that positive impact because what you're trying to do is different.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think if you compare, I think the challenge is, and certainly in like sustainability, zero waste, there's so much kind of perfection that actually we're doing so much more than most people and most brands and everything else, and just giving yourself credit for it, because we've had huge issues and challenges over the years. And it's like, well, actually, we're benefiting people. And that is ultimately what we're trying to do. And it may be one person, it may be 10 people, it may be 1,000 people, but actually one life changed is still a very positive thing that many people don't necessarily. So I think you're right. It's kind of, you need to reframe it every now and again.
Yeah, because you can be depressed and think, oh no, I had to pay this customer back, however much money, but we still had to pay out for the social enterprise who made the item, even though the item wasn't quite what it was meant to be, but those people were still paid for that job, and everything was done really, really well. But it's like you say, it's just reframing and thinking, well, I suppose after every project, it's looking at the positives rather than kicking yourself about the things that don't always go right. But
it's a hard one, because I think it also, if you're doing this, that's not how your brain works.
No, that's true.
I focus much more. I mean, I see everybody else and I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then look at mine and kind of like, yeah, but we're not doing this and we're doing that. And I had a bit of a meltdown a couple of weeks ago where I'm doing a bit more. So I've gone back to not working on this full time because I need to pay my bills. And at the moment, the business isn't in a position to pay me, or at least we can put much more into it and have a bigger impact. And kind of, if I'm paying myself from something else, and I felt like I was going backwards, because it's like I was working on it full time and now I'm not. And you just have to kind of talk to people who go, yeah, but that's because you're growing the team, and that's because you've got a shop, and that's because you're a beacon, you're kind of, things are moving forwards. That's your perception of what you should be doing. And as you say, take the should out of it. And it's like, well, actually, that means that we can move that much further forwards, because we can,
it's a decision.
Yeah.
You're making a decision. I mean, my accountant said to me right from the word go, you should be paying yourself a salary and then the business can create debt, and then you can claim against that debt. And I was like, I don't want to do it that way. I don't want to do it way. That's not how I want to do it. I'd much rather do it in a way that makes sense to me, which is growing. And then when the money's coming in, you can start sharing it out again, So it's just doing things. I don't want to play silly games with it. So yeah, I'm actually the same as you. I'm not working well, it feels like I'm working full time on it, but I'm also working on other things too, for practical reasons and also mental health reasons too.
Yeah, no, I think all those things are important, and kind of surrounding yourself with, I mean, even conversations like this, it's a bit like therapy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I love my podcast sessions. I look forward to it because it's like it helps you sort of not go a bit mad sometimes.
Well, you sort of look from the outside, you see somebody in a business and it's like, I think what you're doing is amazing. And but there's a reality behind, and it's just nice to kind of understand and go, actually, there are challenges, and we're all day to day kind of doing amazing stuff, and also making really tough decisions and kind of struggling with things. And actually, that's the reality.
I guess we're running. We're all running. Well, people like us, and we know plenty of people who think in similar ways than us. You're always hugely supportive, and there's also an element of it helps as part of a network. But I know when you got your B Corp thing, I was so excited and proud for you. And then there's a nagging voice in my head saying, right, you've got to do it now.
Why haven't you done that? Yeah.
I know. Then part of me's like, well, you've thought about it, but you haven't got around to it, and that's absolutely fine. But so it's I think it's a healthy way of, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have to be scared. I can just talk to Sarah about it, because I know someone who is doing it. So it's the advantage of being part of a network and knowing that other people are driven in a similar way.
Yeah, I think I mean, the groups that we are part of and have been part of over the years are definitely, and I think that's one of the advantages of kind of working in this space, is that people are more helpful and collaborative and supportive than competitive, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, okay, how can we support each other? Because we're all ultimately trying to achieve the same thing, which is be a force for good in some way, in some area. And as you say, if I can save people time, stress by sharing our B Corp stuff, because I went through all of that, if I can make it easier for somebody, brilliant, because it might be the right thing, it might not be the right thing, but at least you can sort of share a bit more about it to help people. So
well, you can't dilute doing good, can you? I mean, that's the thing, which we're trying to, if you get B Corp and then 5 other people get B Corp as well, that isn't making your B Corp less, that's making there be more B Corps to do more good.
So
that's the thing, when you're I suppose when you're purely competing financially with people, you'll be afraid you'll lose some of your money to them. But when your impact is about, as you say, changing the world, the more we can do that, the better.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, actually, because it is, yeah, somebody asked me and I didn't really, they were kind of like, well, what happens if everybody becomes a B Corp? And it's like, well, I'm not doing it for competitive advantage. I'm doing it because it's the right, that would be brilliant. And then we wouldn't need to be talking about half this stuff, because everybody would be thinking about their social footprint and their environmental stuff. And, you know, it's like, that's the point.
Yes.
Actually, if you think of it as, you know, we're just trying to compete, then you kind of miss the point, really. It's like, we're not doing it for that reason. If everybody else is, great.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, it's without getting well deep, man, it's that whole the model, you know, the economic model that we're working in now that's driving most businesses is just completely broken. You know, make more of stuff, sell as much as you can, you know, that kind of thing. And it is all about trying to compete, trying to sell more. And yes, we need to sell items, but that's really, or purely really, so that we can make the impact that we're trying to make. So that's why we're trying to do things, not to make the money. But the economic model, which is totally rubbish, is driving people in a different way. So they don't see it. They see it in terms of competition, but actually it isn't like that. But I'm preaching to the converted here. I hope people listening understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, last question, and then I'll let you get on with your evening. What advice would you give to other small ethical brands, obviously, like where does it come from, that are considering going for B Corp certification? What would you say to us?
I would say, well, my initial response would be 100% do it. But I want to caveat that with, not because you feel you should.
Okay. That's
After our conversation, because I think actually there's a bit of pressure, which I hadn't necessarily been conscious of until our conversation, in terms of, you know, there's a, well, they've done it, we should do it. And I wasn't aware, I hadn't thought about that. So that's kind of a little bit of a reflection from my side, is like, actually, it isn't a default for everyone. It's not necessarily the right thing to do. However, I think it's quite good. But what I would say is use the tool more than anything, because you don't necessarily need to certify. There's obviously pros and cons of doing that. But the tool itself, the B impact assessment on their website, is brilliant to help you improve what you're doing as a business. So there's value in that anyway. I think if you're in this space thinking about, going back to the earlier kind of points about why you're doing it, it's not for competitive advantage. It is because the movement is kind of the direction that we should be going in, and therefore it's something you want to be part of. There's the Better Business Act that businesses can sign up to, which is kind of a step towards that in terms of trying to change company legislation to reflect social and environmental measures as well as financial in reporting. So there's kind of intermediate steps. Otherwise, I would say, if you're going to do it, recognize it's a lot of time commitment, properly put the time and effort in, make notes, save everything, because partly because of how long it takes. You'll come back, you sort of do the first questions, and then you'll come back through this verification process a year, 18 months later, and go, what the hell was that? And even if you know your business inside out, but you answer these things, and just being really thorough will save you time in the long run. Making notes, especially on the calculations, because you have to do some calculations all the way through it. If you just put the number in, like, unless your accounting and spreadsheet stuff is better than mine, you'll wonder where you got that from. So I think kind of being really thorough in that sense is brilliant. And then using what other B Corps are doing. So there's brilliant tips in the tool itself. Everybody is transparent. Ask them, ask me. I'm very happy to kind of share all our policies, everything that we wrote, to kind of go through it. Connect with local groups. So there are B Local, there's B Leaders. And otherwise kind of just go for it, really, as part of that sustainability journey, but recognize that that is only the starting point. So certifying is brilliant, but it's a long-term commitment, and you will want to carry on, and you will kind of set goals and stuff in the meantime. So it's definitely a big step, but I think a positive one.
That's fantastic advice, Sarah. It really is. I mean, and actually thinking about it, if you're listening to this and you're running a business, or thinking of running a business, and maybe, you know, sustainability isn't your core thing. Maybe you've got a big sort of different business goals, but actually you could use these tools to help you make your business more sustainable, even if it's not the core of that business. So if that tool is there, that's going to help everybody, isn't it, to get more sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you don't have to go back to the thing about, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be the best, most sustainable business in the world. Everybody doing something is really important. And even companies that are kind of never going to do this, there are still opportunities as part of this whole piece, the assessment and everything else, to kind of improve what you're doing. And just thinking about the people that are impacted by what you do, the environment, your local environment, the planet more broadly, how that is impacted. And if you can make some small changes, particularly as a big business, you are going to have a huge impact, because their footprint is so much bigger than ours. And if they change 10% of their packaging, you really will start to change things. And that then makes it more accessible for everybody. It brings the price down, which is one of the challenges with all of this. And it starts customers and everybody else kind of asking and answering the questions. So I think, whether you're going to go the whole way or not, doing something is definitely.
I love that. Definitely. I mean, for me, the B Corp, the attraction for B Corp for me, always since I became aware of it, several years ago, was the fact that it's environment and social, which obviously is key for you and key for us as well. So we've sort of we've worked, we've wiggled around really with fair trade and organic and all of those kind of things. It's really nice to have something that looks at those areas, but also more than that, looking at your staff and your governance and all that. So it's the holistic side of it that is attractive to me, because it means you've got one thing, but as you say, using the tool, you can just focus on different areas. And I absolutely love the idea of using the tool as a tool and not as a means to an end. That's really, really good advice for people. So not to be afraid, because I suppose there is an element of, as you say, it's a huge step, but if you're just seeing it as a way of, I think I'll improve my business and I'll start through this process and see where it leads me, that's not quite so daunting, is it?
Well, it will give you ideas for things to do, and it will give you ideas of stuff to think about that you never considered. So I think, like you, we've got fair trade, we've got GOTS, we've got kind of not smaller but more specific certifications and things that we focus on and that are important. But this is the one holistic thing, and I think that's what's nice about it, is, again, whether you certify and submit or not, you will kind of map out everything that you're doing. So you can pick your packaging, you can pick your banking, you can pick your energy. We've talked on, as part of some of the ethical hour conversations about your digital footprint and digital sustainability. It gives you those things that you probably haven't really thought about, and you can make, again, some big impacts in those areas without having to holistically or completely, overhaul everything that you're doing, but gradually you can make some significant changes. So I think it is very much, and you can do things across, because it is, as you say, it maps everything. So you really can look at everything that you're doing. And even if you've only got a couple of people that work with you part-time, you can make their working lives with you and experience with you better. And you can start to pay the living wage that will then kind of encourage everybody else that they're working with to also do it. It puts the pressure on more broadly. And I mean, we've probably upset people in the market in Oxford, because we've got our living wage sign up, and I know when other people are recruiting, they've had to do the same thing, and it's like, well, that's a good thing.
That is a really good thing. No, well done. That's a really good thing.
It puts pressure, but it also, it's like, well, that's just increasing everybody's.
It's raising the bar, as they say in the horrible management speak. But no, absolutely. And I think for me as well, we're both involved in supply chain businesses, but helping you know what questions to ask suppliers. So are you using renewable energy? What are your working standards? How those kind of questions, because you're asking them within your own business, it means that you can ask them of other businesses, and then that steps them up as well, because they have to answer those questions. So anyway, that's it. Carry on. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was just thinking specifically about some of the jargon as well, because if you say to someone, it gives you the terminology, it gives you the words to use and the questions to ask, because as you say, are you sustainable? They go, yeah. Do you care about people and the planet? Yeah. But you can actually say, okay, what are you doing? What's your policy on this? What is your modern slavery view? Kind of, what are you doing about it? And it then again is just going to have that much bigger an impact, basically, because it will actually be tangible and something they will do.
Yes, exactly. Once they've said they're doing it, in most cases they either are or will sort out to make sure they are.
Yeah.
But, no, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. That's really brilliant advice. Just to sum up, I love that. Use the tool, even if you're not going to go for the certification. And anybody can use the tool and do it, and make yourself a B Corp, or don't, but just make your business better. That's kind of the answer. So congratulations hugely again for becoming a B Corp, the highest scoring B Corp in the UK and the top scoring fashion brand in the world. So congratulations on that, and thank you so much for talking to me today on the Where Does It Come From Where Does It Come From podcast. Sarah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.